Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets Podcast. Today it is my privilege to bring you Max Nijst, host of the Fearless Happyness Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets Podcast. My name is Kale Houser, CEO and co-founder of Kale Houser Leadership. It is my amazing honor and privilege to bring to you this amazing man, Mr. Max Nijst. He is the founder and host of the Fearless Happyness Podcast. He's also an author, a speaker, and a coach. Mr. Max, thank you so much for joining me today. Happy New Year. I hope you had a fantastic holiday with your family. And thank you again for donating your time and being willing to talk with me tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me here, Kale. The honor's all mine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We kind of got introduced to each other through a mutual friend, and we come from very different worlds, to put it lightly. Like, we've had different, obviously different upbringings and different things, although I think we're very similar in age. Our experiences have led us down drastically different paths, which I think is so fascinating because we can learn so much from people that have different experiences with us, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to talk a little bit with your podcast. So Fearless Happyness, right? That seems a kind of a contradiction to start with. What led you to that? Why a podcast? Talk to us a little bit about that journey and what the point and purpose of your podcast is.
Oh, that's a great question. So when I started the Fearless Happyness Podcast, I had written a book by the same name, right? Which was my journey from active addiction into recovery. And I celebrated last year on September 27, 19 years clean and sober.
Awesome.
So
Congratulations.
Originally, when I started the podcast, I thought it was going to be like a recovery type thing only, right? Like only addiction and people in recovery. And then as I started gathering and getting guests, I realized that there's more challenges to life than just addiction, right? People have different challenges they've gone through. And I've had some really amazing guests share some of the challenges they went through, right? Childhood into teen, into adult, and the things that shaped them to become who they are today, right? The successes that they are today. And I realized that I wanted to interview as many people as I could from, like you said, different backgrounds to show what their challenges were, that we can be successful no matter what pops up in life, right? We may have a difficult time, right? But like you and I know, right? We look at challenges as, okay, so if there's a wall, correct? Okay, that's a challenge. I'm not going to run my head into the wall, right? I'm either going to go way around it and figure out how to get around it, or I'm going to get a ladder and go over it, right? Because, we can't quit on ourselves, especially us entrepreneurs, right? That want to start a business, or fathers, for instance, or whatever, families. You can't just at one challenge give up and go, okay, I quit, right? You're not going to go anywhere.
No.
Right. So I took my own experience from, when I was addicted to drugs and alcohol to becoming an entrepreneur probably 3 years ago now, right? And starting this podcast and starting to surround myself with like-minded people, not only in recovery, right? But just anybody in general who has a story to share, because I believe we all have a story to share. And I wanted to get people's stories out to the universe, right? And show what fearless looks like for them and what happiness, right? But see, in my case, I put a Y in the happiness, and a lot of people look at that like, you spelt it wrong. I want you to figure that out, right? I wasn't that bad in spelling, but I did that for a reason, and we can get into that. But that's why I came up with Fearless Happyness, because one of the mentors I was working with that was helping me, create my coaching business that I do, in my consulting or counseling, whatever you want to call it. He called me the Fearless Happyness Ninja, right? Because I have been through some serious challenges, in not only right in my recovery or my addiction, but even when I was sober, there was some things that happened in my life that were like, at the time I thought, how am I going to get through this? But I did. And every time we met, I don't know if it's because he made me smile, but I was always smiling and always cracking jokes with him. And he goes, I'm calling you the Fearless Happiness Ninja, and the name is stuck.
Nice. I love it. There are definitely worse names to be called, and that is absolutely a compliment for sure. I love that.
Thank you. And I've been called those other names back in the day, but
Right.
not anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to touch on because you mentioned it about talking through and having guests on your podcast and talking through their challenges, right? Now, do you focus on the traumatic kind of challenges, or are you like the more everyday kind of challenges of like, oh, I can't get people to show up to work, or my employees are just, goofing off all the time. Like, I would assume based on your background, it's more of those types of, traumatic, and you talk about childhood. Is that one way or the other, or is it kind of just any challenges that you focus on?
Well, when I ask, like, I ask those specific, like, traumatic challenges, right? And then,
Okay.
right, uh, almost every guest I've had, right, they've become successful in whatever, whether it's fitness, whether it's in business, um, whatever the case may be. And then I ask them that, like, so what are some of your challenge, business wise, or in your job, like getting an employee to show up on time, right? How do you use your experiences in those challenges early on help you, you know what I mean, become that leader so you could work with someone, right? Because, I've been in positions where you're late, you get fired, right? But then I've had great leaders, great managers actually sit me down and go, hey, what's going on? Like, to try to find out so they can be helpful and help me change that and then become successful, right? So I ask all kinds of challenging questions, like, right, what were some of the things you went through in your childhood that maybe still affect you as an adult, right? And and then, like you said, in business, like, there's all kinds of challenges we face, right? Whether it's our employees or even with ourselves sometimes, right? Do we get overwhelmed, right? Are we trying to do everything ourselves? So now I'm feeling anxious, and right, things may not be going my way. So how do you manage depression if that's right when you're the leader of your
Setbacks.
business, right? Or, how do you handle those? So, yeah, I do all kinds. It doesn't matter. It's not always traumatic, but you know what I mean? I like to ask those because what happens is I really get to know the person, and then it kind of directs me in the questions I can ask when it comes to business or personal life, and how they are right now, like in today's environment with all the craziness, as you know, that went on with COVID and everything.
Yeah, yeah. And the truth is, we all have a story. We all have those experiences, whether they're, traumatic or not. We've all had those setbacks and challenges and hurdles we've had to overcome to get where we are today. I do want to
Right.
ask, because there may be somebody listening to this now, or in the future, who knows, years or decades from now, if we're all around by then, that is facing those challenges, and maybe it's a traumatic challenge that they're having to overcome. Based on your experience in talking, whether it be your own or in talking with all these guests that you've had on your podcast, what would be, and I don't mean to put you on the spot so much, but what is there something, or what would be something that you would tell that person that is facing that is like, they're not fearless. The thought of being fearless, let alone happy, is might as well be on Neptune for them. Is there some advice or encouragement that you would offer to a person in that situation?
Well, as you know, as a leader yourself, right? I would ask the question, where do you want to, those typical questions, where do you want to see yourself, right? A year from now, 5 years from now. And then go from there, right? Break down, like, well, what is holding you back, right? Do you know who you are, right? And trying to get to that root problem, like, what is the fear that's holding them back? And like, to me, what happened with my mentors and some of my coaches, right? That I got asked over and over again, and I'd always skirt it for a while, is, Max, what are you afraid of? Right? And I would always, oh, I'm not afraid of anything. And then I would, like, exit stage left so I didn't have to really sit and answer that question. And then I sat one time with a mentor, and he asked me, he says, what are you afraid of? And I said, well, I'm afraid that it's possibly not going to work out the way it should. And he looked at me and he goes, it probably won't. But if you do the work and you persevere, it'll probably turn out better than you could ever hope for. So don't ever quit on yourself. And that's when I went, wow, this person really cares. And this guy has some insight, right? because I've seen successes not only in business, Kale, but like in my recovery community. I mean, I'm going to show your audience this, right? So from that picture to where I went to, um, there was part in my story where I thought like, I'm not going to be a success story, right? Because it's the things we tell ourselves over and over again that we believe, whether it's how we were raised or, and then I started hanging around guys like you who told me, you want to be a success, then tell yourself you're going to be a success, right? And then go do the work, right? Because like The Secret, they tell you, oh yeah, you put the thoughts out there, you're going to get everything, right? They didn't tell you,
Visualize.
yeah, they didn't tell you that there's actual work to be done, right?
Right.
But you still have to do that. So then I started hanging out with guys like you who are where I want to be. And then they told me, yeah, you got to put that out there, right? But you got to come up with a plan. You got to execute that plan. And if you fail, you get back up, you brush yourself off, and you do it again. Because there's probably a lesson you needed to learn in that, right? And if you learn those lessons, um, you'll start stacking those wins and you'll become successful. But for a long time, Cal, I was so down on myself for the things I did in the past that it was keeping me stuck in the present and not letting me move forward with my future, if that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. 100% that makes sense. And that is such a common theme for those of us that have had those massive, whether they're traumatic or not, but just massive setbacks, those failures in our past. And I mean, that's the key, right? That's the real trick. And that's why there are coaches like you. There are coaches like me that help people with that exact thing. It's not that they don't know what to do or how to do it. It's just getting out of their own head that's telling them you suck, you'll never be good enough. And finally, figuring out like, no, you are capable of this. It's just putting that foot in front of another and doing that. That's pretty
Absolutely.
impressive.
Getting taught how to get out of my own way, as they say, and do the
Right.
work.
Yeah. Which is something we're not taught. Like it's not a natural ability, you always hear this, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't come out of the suck and then just all of a sudden magically be like, oh, rainbows and unicorns, right? And just everything's magical.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Now, you host the podcast. We've seen your book, which is legit. So author, speaker, you do speaking engagements. Now a coach. Now you had mentioned you have transitioned now of helping other people, like you that have gone through similar paths, and even others that want to avoid those types of pitfalls in the past. Talk to us a little bit about, what is it that is different about you as a coach? Do you do business coaching? Is this more like lifestyle, personal coaching? Like what does that model look like for you?
Right. So my coaching, what I call it is recovery coaching or mindset and accountability coaching.
Okay.
Right. So say I'm working with an executive or a CEO who's built a business, right? Really successful, but has begun to burn the candle at both ends, as they say, right? And let's say he starts, he comes to me and says, Max, I've been drinking till from the time I get up till the time I go to bed. And in between, I'm doing other things to keep me going. And I'm afraid I'm going to lose everything. So that's where I start. I start with them right where they're at. And then we work from there. And then I coach him. And it's like a coaching slash counseling style where, right, I'm going to teach him that, that drinking and that, drugging or whatever, that's just a symptom of what's really going on. So like what's going on, we're going to have to dig deep and you're going to have to figure out um, why you're doing this. Right. Um, and I chose that, right? Because part of me is that one that goes, if I'm going to go all in, I'm going to go all in. Right. And I don't know, but I mean, not executives, high performers, and CEOs are not going to go posting on Facebook, "Hey, I've been drinking till I pass out. I need help." Right.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
me, it's just been, having gone through that now and being sober 19 years, like I'm trying to lead by example. So here's where I came from, and here's where I'm going. And if you want to come along, let's do it. And I can show you some things that I have done, right, that will help you get out of that if you're willing to put the work in.
Right. Right. And you're absolutely correct. I don't see too many posts that say, hey, I just closed this huge client. It only took me 7 bottles of Jack Daniels in the last 3 days to get through it. Right. Like you just don't see that
Exactly.
very often. And I
Yeah.
love that you are meeting this because that is a group of people. One, they exist, right? No matter how successful people look on the outside, there are chinks in the armor for all of us. And we all have those moments and that lead to days, that lead to months, that lead to potentially years that go down these not healthy paths. And it's awesome because
Right.
based on your experiences, that gives you the validity and the credibility to talk with those CEOs and executives that are going through that. Whereas
Right.
I don't have that to be able to relate and understand. Sure, I can tell them, all the things I think they should do and know, but it's not coming
Right.
from a voice of experience like yourself, like the actual, I've been there. I can relate to you. I know what's going through your brain right now. I know how powerful that pull is at times. That's awesome
Yeah.
that you are filling that need.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I love what I
100%.
do. And right. And I don't consider just like CEOs and executives as high performers, right? We got first responders out there, we got firemen, policemen, right? That also can't really go, hey man, I got a problem, right? In fear they may lose their job. So like confidentiality absolutely is key,
Right.
but I want them to know there is help for them out there without having to, right, blast it all over the place and say, um, in the risk of losing everything they built.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fascinating that you say that because I just want to give this one example because I think it's so relevant and applicable and it reinforces that mindset exactly. Because I came out of the military field doing RPAs, the MQ9s, the hunter killer stuff. And the long-term effects of that, of watching in HD people getting missiles and bombs dropping all over the place, is yet to be determined. But it was at least recognized by our hierarchy that, hey, maybe we should have a counselor kind of in-house that you can go and talk to if you're having that issues, right? Because we're all in this macho, you're in the military, and this macho like, oh, of course, no big deal. But then we come to find out, leading back to your kind of confidentiality and things like that, we kind of found out one of the gals that she was super fascinated with our career field and the effects of it, right? The mental health effects of it.
Right.
We come to find out she was writing a book, and she was using a lot of the stuff from the people and the young men and women that were going to see her as fodder for her book about talking, all these things. And it was such obviously she didn't name names or anything, but it was such a betrayal of the overall confidentiality and trust that was supposed to be there, from someone like that you help. So I just wanted to recognize on that example of the horrible end of what could go wrong when you don't have that versus what, you obviously respect that and understand the critical nature in that relationship. So that's pretty legit.
Absolutely. And thank you for your service, right? And definitely my highest performers are our military, whether active duty or veterans, right? The ones that put their lives on the line so we could live free. And I've had the privilege of working with some veterans before, and it's just it doesn't seem they get the help that they need. You know what I mean? And that's why I started this too, also, is to help veterans and help them find the help they need, right? Because a lot of the time, I hate to say it, the VA just sends them off to get some medication and then, right? And the wait list usually is months before they can
Yeah.
even see a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Yeah,
So,
it's
yeah,
pretty incredible. We could spend a whole series of many long hours talking about that easily. Yeah.
absolutely. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I do want to ask, so what do you have anything coming up? Like you said, you're a speaker or maybe a second book that's in the works that you've had in the back of your brain. What's going on in your world that maybe people should start kind of perking their ears up about?
Well, that definitely for 2023 is my goal, is to get on and speak more in front of these people that I want to serve and that I want to help. Book number two, I'm glad that you mentioned it, is going to be a project of mine, right? So it's in its infancy.
Right.
It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be better than my first one, right? Because I have a lot of experiences that I didn't get to share in my first book, right? Where I'm going to share about how my recovery has gone and the challenges I face sober and not having that crutch of a drink or a drug to go, okay, I'm going to check out today. So I've got that in the works. You know, I'm doing like what they call a Dream 25 of, you know, podcast guests like yourself. So, you know, I'm going to be reaching out to you, but I want to keep leveling up in, how do you want to say it? Like getting my podcast out there and getting it, you know, known by everybody. So, and I think just having a better year of consistency, at least for me, especially when it comes to physical fitness, because I was off for a year because of back surgery. So like
Ooh,
I'm
yeah.
on fire to get physically fit. I mean, I already started last year at the, you know, 2 or 3 months ago with CrossFit. So my goal is to keep that going and to be the best, you know, that I can be, so that, you know, if I'm talking to someone, hey, go exercise, you know, that's going to help with your depression or anxiety. They're not going to look at me and go, really, Max? Have you looked in the mirror? You know, have you looked in the mirror, Max? So just, you know, well, and I have 10 grandchildren now. So it's time for me to, you know, step up so I can keep up with those
Yeah.
grandchildren.
Yeah, which for those of you watching this on YouTube and looking at Max, or if you've visited his social media or his website and seen a picture of him, he does not look like he should have 10 grandchildren. He is definitely not old enough for that, but that is amazing that you do that. And in us talking before, it is so evident that like family is number one for you, absolutely. And I love that you have that outlook, because it's a dying breed, right? Men that want to stay and build families and make that generational impact it's sadly a dying breed in our culture, I think. So
Absolutely.
that's
And I
incredible.
think if you want to build a legacy, as you know, we've talked about, right? It has to start with your family,
Yeah,
right? You
100%.
want to
You're
carry it
right.
on, you know, you got to start at home, I say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So we will keep the ear to the ground for book number 2. Any potential title spoilers you may want to throw out there that we can think about? Have you thought
Yeah,
about it
you
yet?
know what? I've thought a little bit, so I don't have anything
Yeah.
for you yet. But
Okay.
as soon as I know,
Okay.
Kel, you'll be one of the first to know because. But
Love
there's
it.
a couple, but I'm not sure yet of
Yeah.
where I want to go with the title.
That's
I'll
cool.
make
Yeah.
sure
All
it's
right.
spelled correctly though this time around.
Although I will say people love like when things are misspelled. Like, oh, it just brings that much more attention to everything because we love calling out mistakes, right? It just makes us feel better about ourselves when we catch other people making dumb grammar mistakes, stuff like that. It's so funny. Oh man. Well, I know that people absolutely want to get into your world. What is the best way for them to, whether it be follow on social media, what's the best way for them to reach out and get in contact with you, Max?
On social media, I'm on Facebook. It's max.nijst, which is max.nijst. I'm on Instagram as the Fearless Happiness Ninja. I'm on Twitter as Max Nijst. I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. And I have a website, and it's maxnijst.org.
Awesome. Awesome. So yes, everybody, if you're listening, absolutely give Max a follow on your favorite platform. Kind of looks like he's on and TikTok, right? You do TikTok as well?
Yeah, but I'm not so great with TikTok. I'm learning how to do
Yeah.
TikTok. Like,
I'm
I
the
get
same way.
intimidated when I see those people that are great at doing their little videos, and I'm like, okay, I'll give this another.
Right.
We'll do
Right.
the
When the
same.
video, yeah, the video next to you has like 4.7 million views and you're like 207. You're like, oh, yeah,
Exactly.
I feel you a
You're
little
one
bit
of
on
those
that one.
TikTokers that has like 11 million followers, and you got like 800 and
Right.
something. You're like, okay, I
Yeah.
think I'll just keep watching.
Yeah, I love it. Oh man, you struggle with the same things we all do. I love it. You're the everyday man. That's perfect.
That's
Well,
right.
I do ask because this is a leadership secrets podcast, and one of the questions I ask all my guests is whether on your experience or just kind of your thoughts about it, what is your interpretation of the difference between a manager versus a leader in a business sense? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, I'll give you like from my experience, right? As
Okay.
a 54-year-old man who's worked for other people, works for other people, and has created his own business. Like the difference between management and a leader to me is right. There's people that are really good at managing other people, like saying jobs they have to do and making sure they get done. right? Where for me, what I have learned, not only from my military experience, but even from my addiction and getting sober and other things I've done, a leader is not afraid to get in the trenches with you and show you how to become a leader, if that makes sense, right? Not only how to do your job well, but kind of like take you under their wing and say, here, I'll sit next to you. I'll show you how to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to teach you to be a leader. So
Right.
that, because I think a good leader teaches people to lead so that they can do that with the next people that come, that may need the help. So
Yeah.
that's my take on leadership versus management.
I absolutely love that. And that's something that, honestly, I don't think a lot of my guests, and I don't recall specifically that anyone has talked about the leader is the one who teaches other people to lead. And that is so sorely missed definitely in our workplace, right? Like 100% in our workplace,
Right.
it's out the window. But man, what a fascinating thought process. I love that. Like I'm thinking through that right now of that definition of leader, despite all the other things, right? The tasks and the how to, the technical skill. It kind of like doesn't matter if the people that you're leading don't know how to lead down the road, right? Like I love that. That was really good. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any last thoughts? Any last plugs you wanna shout out to us before we wrap up?
If there's one piece of advice that I could give your audience is don't ever quit on yourself, right? Keep
Yeah.
your head up, keep smiling, and keep putting one foot in front of the other, because success is just on the other side of those challenges, and you just got to keep going.
Yes.
If that's one piece of advice I could give to your audience.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love it, and I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. The only way to fail is to quit. Is really the matter of the fact. And thank you for your service. I forgot to mention that earlier. I know we had talked about this earlier, and I appreciate that as well, that you've been part of that community. And it's obviously still a part of your heart and wanting to serve that community. So thank you for that.
All right. Thank you for your service.
Yeah. All right, everybody. This has been the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast with my amazing guest, Max Nijst. I appreciate you coming on and joining me today. It has been quite eye-opening, and I loved hearing about what you've got going on, Max. So thank you so much. Have a fantastic afternoon, no matter where you're at in the world, everybody. Bye.